The stars were dying one by one. Captain Jake Morrison watched the tactical display with tired eyes. Red markers showed enemy positions across the outer rim. Each marker represented a Kythera bioship, and there were hundreds of them. His own forces showed as blue dots on the screen. There were only 12 left. "Captain, we're getting reports from the Dakota colony," said Lisa Grant from her position at the tactical station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the strain. "The evacuation ships are under attack." Jake looked at the main screen. The planet Dakota Prime burned in the distance. Orange flames covered half the world where the Kythera had started their harvest. The aliens didn't just destroy planets. They consumed them, turning all life into fuel for their war machine. "How many ships do they have protecting the evacuees?" Jake asked. 3 frigates and a destroyer," Lisa replied. "The Kythera have sent 20 bioships after them." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. 20 against 4. The evacuation ships carried 50,000 civilians. Women, children, elderly people who had never hurt anyone. If those ships died, 50,000 innocent lives would end. "Pete, what's our engine status?" Jake called to the engineering station. Chief Engineer Pete Collins looked up from his console. Sweat covered his face despite the cool air on the bridge. "We've got maybe 2 more jumps left in the hyperdrive, sir. After that, we'll need at least 6 hours for repairs." "Amy, send a message to the other ships in our group," Jake said to his communications officer. "Tell them we're going to help Dakota Prime." Amy Torres nodded and started typing. She was young, maybe 25, but she had been with Jake's crew for 2 years. She had seen more death and destruction than most people saw in a lifetime. The ship Defiant had been Jake's home for 5 years. She was old, built 30 years ago when humans first joined the Galactic Federation. Her armor was scarred from dozens of battles. Her weapons were outdated compared to the new Federation ships, but she was fast and her crew knew how to fight. "Sir, the other captains are asking if you're sure about this," Amy said. "Captain Rodriguez says his ship can barely make 1 more jump." "Tell them I'm sure," Jake replied. "We can't leave those people to die." The bridge fell quiet except for the hum of the engines. Jake looked around at his crew. Lisa had been with him since the beginning. She was the best tactical officer in the fleet, and she could read enemy movements like a book. Pete could keep any ship running with spare parts and determination. Amy had volunteered for communications duty because she spoke 7 languages and could talk to any alien species in the Federation. They were good people. They deserved better than dying in a hopeless war. "Jump in 3 minutes," Lisa announced. "All ships report ready." Jake activated the ship's internal communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going to help evacuation ships at Dakota Prime. The enemy has superior numbers, but we've faced worse odds before. Do your jobs, watch each other's backs, and we'll all go home together." The hyperdrive engaged with a deep thrumming sound. Space twisted around the Defiant, and suddenly they were in the Dakota system. Immediately, alarms started ringing. 21 bioships on sensors," Lisa called out. "They're attacking the evacuation convoy." Jake looked at the main screen. The Kythera ships looked like giant insects made of metal and flesh. They moved in ways that defied normal physics, twisting and turning like living creatures. Their weapons fired streams of energy that could eat through any armor. "All ships, attack pattern Delta," Jake ordered. "Focus on the bioships closest to the civilians." The Defiant dove toward the enemy formation. Her old pulse cannons opened fire, sending streams of blue energy at the nearest Kythera ship. The enemy vessel's shields flared and died. The bioship returned fire and the Defiant shook as energy beams struck her hull. "Shields down to 60%, Pete called out. "There," Lisa pointed at the screen. 3 bioships are breaking off to attack us." Jake smiled grimly. "Good. That's 3 less attacking the civilians." The battle raged for 20 minutes. Jake's small force managed to destroy 8 enemy ships, but they lost 2 of their own vessels. The Defiant took heavy damage. Her shields failed completely and her port engine was offline. "Captain, the evacuation ships are clear," Amy reported. "They've jumped to hyperspace." "All ships fall back," Jake ordered. "We've done what we came to do." But as they prepared to retreat, Lisa's console lit up with new contacts. "Sir, 15 more bioships just jumped in. They're moving to intercept us." Jake felt his heart sink. With their damaged ships and depleted weapons, they couldn't fight 15 fresh enemy vessels. They had saved the civilians, but now his own people were trapped. "Pete, can we jump?" he asked. The engineer shook his head. "Hyperdrive is offline. We need at least an hour for repairs." Jake looked at the tactical display. The enemy ships were closing in. In 10 minutes, they would be in weapons range. His crew looked at him, waiting for orders. Then Amy's console beeped. "Sir, I'm getting a massive energy reading from the dark side of Luna. Something big just appeared on our long-range sensors." Lisa checked her instruments. "Confirmed. It's huge, maybe 2 kilometers long, but it's not broadcasting any identification codes." "Is it Kythera?" Jake asked. "No, sir. The energy signature is completely different. It's like nothing in our database." Jake stared at the mysterious reading on his screen. In 3 years of war, nothing good had ever appeared without warning. But right now, with enemy ships closing in and nowhere to run, he was willing to hope for a miracle. "Set course for Luna," he ordered. "Whatever that thing is, it's better than staying here to die." The Defiant limped toward Earth's moon, followed by the remaining ships of Jake's battle group. Behind them, the Kythera bioships gave chase, their alien weapons charging for another attack. In the distance near Luna's dark side, something waited. Something that would change everything. The ship appeared like a ghost against the black of space. Admiral Helen Burke stood in the command center of Earth Defense Station Alpha, staring at the main display screen. The unknown vessel hung in space near Luna's dark side, its hull reflecting starlight in strange patterns. It was massive, bigger than any ship in the Earth Defense Force. "Ma'am, we're getting more detailed scans now," reported Lieutenant Commander Gary Webb from his sensor station. "The hull is made of some kind of metal we don't recognize. There are geometric patterns all over the surface that seem to bend light." Helen frowned. In her 30 years of service, she had seen ships from dozens of alien species. This one looked different from all of them, but there was something familiar about its basic shape. "What about weapons?" she asked. "That's the strange part," Gary replied. "We can detect weapon ports, but they're not like anything in our database. Some of them seem to exist in multiple dimensions at the same time." Helen turned to her communications officer. "Nancy, any response to our hails?" Lieutenant Nancy Phillips shook her head. "Nothing yet, ma'am. But wait." She pressed her earpiece closer. "I'm getting something now. It's on an old Earth military frequency that hasn't been used in decades." The main screen flickered and changed to show a transmission signal. Static filled the screen for a moment, then cleared to show a man's face. He was maybe 60 years old with gray hair and weathered features. He wore a uniform that Helen recognized from old history books. "This is Captain Dan Hayes of the Earth space vessel Wanderer," the man said, "requesting permission to approach Earth Defense Station Alpha." Helen felt her breath catch in her throat. The ESV Wanderer had been Earth's first deep space exploration ship. It had launched 57 years ago and vanished without a trace. Everyone assumed the crew was dead. "Captain Hayes," Helen said carefully, "this is Admiral Helen Burke. According to our records, the Wanderer was lost 57 years ago." Hayes smiled, but it was a tired expression. "Time moves differently where we've been, Admiral. For us, it's been about 15 years. We've been trying to get home ever since we got trapped." "Trapped where?" Helen asked. "In a place that exists between dimensions," Hayes replied. "We've learned things, Admiral. Terrible things about what's really happening in this war. We need to meet in person. I have 3 surviving crew members with me, and we have information that could save the Federation." Helen looked around the command center. Her officers were staring at the screen in amazement. The return of a lost Earth ship would normally be cause for celebration. But these were not normal times. "Captain, we're in the middle of a war," Helen said. "The Kythera Collective has destroyed most of our outer colonies." "We can't risk—" "Admiral," Hayes interrupted. "The Kythera are not your real enemy. They're just tools being used by something much worse. Please let us come aboard. What we've learned could change everything." 2 hours later, Helen waited in the station's main docking bay. The Wanderer's shuttle was unlike any Earth vehicle she had ever seen. It moved through space without visible engines, and its hull seemed to shift between different states of matter. The airlock opened, and 4 people stepped out. Captain Hayes looked older in person, his face marked by years of hardship. Behind him came a woman with short brown hair, a middle-aged man carrying a data tablet, and a younger Asian woman. "Admiral Burke," Hayes said, extending his hand. "Thank you for seeing us. This is my first officer, Kate Miller, Chief Scientist Bob Turner, and Navigation Officer Lucy Pham." Helen shook hands with each of them. Their uniforms were old Earth designs, but the fabric seemed to shimmer with energy. Their equipment was clearly advanced beyond anything Earth currently possessed. "Your ship," Helen said. "How did you modify it so extensively?" We had help, Kate Miller replied, and we had time. Where we were trapped, we learned to work with technologies that don't exist in normal space. They moved to a secure briefing room. Bob Turner activated a holographic projector that filled the air with three-dimensional images. Helen gasped when she saw what appeared to be space itself, but twisted into impossible shapes. This is the dimensional space where we were trapped, Turner explained. It's inhabited by beings that call themselves the architects. They exist partially outside our reality, and they view our universe as raw material to be reshaped. What does this have to do with the Kithera? Helen asked. Lucy Pham stepped forward. The Kithera Collective are servants of the architects. Every few million years, the architects send them into galaxies like ours. The Kithera weaken the local species and establish dimensional anchor points. Anchor points for what? Helen demanded. For invasion, Hayes said grimly. Once enough anchor points are established, the architects can merge their dimension with ours. They'll remake all matter and energy according to their desires. Every living thing in the galaxy will be transformed into something else. Helen felt cold despite the warm air in the briefing room. How do you know this?
Because we fought them for 15 years, Kate Miller said.
We learned their technology, stole their weapons, and turned our ship into something that can hurt them. The Wanderer is now equipped with dimensional weapons and multi-phase shields. Turner activated another hologram. This one showed the galaxy with red markers scattered throughout. These are the dimensional anchor points the Kithera have already established. There are hundreds of them, and they're building more every day. How do we stop them? Helen asked. There's a primary anchor point, Hayes explained. It's hidden in the Kithera's fortress world, deep in enemy territory. If we can destroy it, we can sever the architect's connection to this reality. The entire collective will lose their dimensional support. Helen stared at the holographic display. The fortress world was surrounded by thousands of enemy ships. It was the most heavily defended location in known space. That's a suicide mission, she said. Maybe, Hayes agreed. But we've been preparing for this fight for 15 years. Our ship can phase through normal matter and strike at dimensional weak points. We can hurt them in ways they don't expect. Even if you're right, one ship can't fight the entire collective, Helen protested. Hayes smiled for the first time since boarding the station. We're not planning to go alone. We can share our technology with the Federation fleet. It won't make your ships as advanced as the Wanderer, but it will give them a fighting chance. Helen looked at each of the returned crew members. They had aged 15 years fighting an enemy that most people couldn't even imagine. They had learned secrets that could save the galaxy, but at a terrible personal cost. How long do we have? She asked. Based on our calculations, maybe 6 weeks, Turner replied. After that, the architects will have enough anchor points to begin the merger process. Helen activated her communication device. All senior staff report to Briefing Room 7 immediately. Priority Alpha. She looked back at Hayes and his crew. Captain, I hope you're right about this. Because if you're not, we're about to lead the entire Federation into the biggest trap in galactic history. Hayes nodded solemnly. Admiral, we've been fighting this war longer than anyone else. Trust me when I say that sometimes the biggest risk is the only chance you have. The truth was worse than anyone had imagined. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the briefing room aboard Earth Defense Station Alpha, listening to the most incredible story he had ever heard. Around the table sat the surviving commanders of the Federation fleet. Admiral Kevoth of the Altarian Navy, Crystal Singer Veltar representing the crystalline Vectar, and Commander Splash of Distant Waters from the amphibious Zephyrian forces. Captain Hayes stood at the front of the room, his weathered face serious as he explained the reality of their situation. Behind him, holographic images showed the dimensional space where his ship had been trapped for 15 years. The war you've been fighting is a lie, Hayes said bluntly. The Kithera Collective are not the real threat. They're just workers preparing the galaxy for their masters. Admiral Kevoth, a tall humanoid with blue skin and silver eyes, leaned forward. You speak of beings called architects. We have never encountered such creatures in our long history. That's because they don't fully exist in our reality, Kate Miller explained. They live in a higher dimensional space. To them, our universe is like a flat drawing on paper. They can see it, change it, but they can't easily enter it directly. Bob Turner activated a new hologram. The image showed a three-dimensional model of the galaxy, with red lines connecting various star systems. This is why they use the Kithera. The collective establishes anchor points that allow the architects to reach into our space. Once they have enough anchor points, they can merge their dimension with ours. Crystal singer Veltar, whose body looked like living crystal, chimed in a harmonic voice. What would happen during such a merger? Everything would change, Lucy Pham answered. Matter, energy, even time itself would be reshaped according to the architect's desires. Every living being in the galaxy would be transformed into something else entirely. Commander Splash of Distant Waters, whose amphibious features were covered by a breathing apparatus, bubbled through her translator. How do you know this is true? Perhaps these architects you describe are simply another enemy species. Hayes walked to the hologram and pointed to a section showing twisted, impossible geometry. Because we've seen their work. In the dimensional space where we were trapped, they showed us what they had done to other galaxies. Billions of stars, trillions of living beings, all converted into raw material for their constructions. Jake felt sick. How many galaxies have they done this to? We stopped counting at 50, Turner replied quietly. They've been doing this for millions of years. It's how they expand their dimensional realm. Admiral Kevoth stood up, his silver eyes flashing with anger. Then why have they not simply destroyed us directly? Why use the Kythera at all? Because direct intervention is difficult for them, Hayes explained. They exist partially outside our reality. It takes enormous effort for them to directly affect our physical space. It's much easier to use servants like the Kythera to do the work for them. Kate Miller activated another display. The anchor points serve two purposes. First, they weaken the barriers between dimensions. Second, they provide the architects with observation posts. They've been watching this galaxy for centuries, learning about each species and how to best use or transform them. Jake looked around the table at the other commanders. The alien faces showed expressions of horror and disbelief. These were leaders who had seen their worlds burned and their people slaughtered. Now they were learning that even worse things were planned for the survivors. There has to be a way to fight them, Jake said. There is, Hayes replied. The anchor points have a weakness. They exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, which makes them powerful but also vulnerable. If we can destroy the primary anchor point, all the others will collapse like a chain reaction. Lucy Pham pointed to a location deep in Kythera space. The primary anchor is located here in the fortress world at the heart of their territory. It's the first anchor they established in this galaxy, and it supports all the others. Admiral Kevoth studied the display. That system is defended by thousands of bioships. No fleet could penetrate those defenses. A normal fleet couldn't, Hayes agreed. But the Wanderer is no longer a normal ship. We've learned to build weapons and shields that operate in multiple dimensions. We can phase through normal matter and strike at dimensional weak points. Turner brought up technical specifications. We can share some of our technology with your ships. It won't make them as advanced as the Wanderer, but it will give them basic dimensional shields and weapons. More importantly, it will allow them to survive in the twisted space around the fortress world. Crystal singer Veltar examined the technical data. These modifications would require extensive work. Our fleets are already damaged from 3 years of war. How long do we have? Commander Splash of Distant Waters asked. 6 weeks at most, Hayes replied. After that, the architects will have established enough anchor points to begin the merger process. Once that starts, we won't be able to stop it. Jake felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. What you're proposing is a suicide mission. Even with dimensional weapons, we'd be massively outnumbered. Hayes met his eyes steadily. Captain Morrison, I've been fighting this enemy for 15 years. I've seen what they're capable of. Yes, it's a suicide mission, but if we don't try, everyone dies anyway. The room fell silent. Each commander was calculating the odds, thinking about their surviving ships and crews. The Federation had maybe 200 vessels left from the original fleet of 3,000. The enemy had 10 times that number. Admiral Kevoth was the first to speak. The Altarian Navy has lost 90% of its strength, but what remains will join this attack. We would rather die fighting than live as transformed slaves. Crystal singer Veltar harmonized agreement. The Vectar collective consciousness agrees. We will contribute our remaining ships and our quantum computers to calculate dimensional jump coordinates. Commander Splash of Distant Waters bubbled through her translator. The Zephyrian Deep Scouts will provide stealth technology to mask the fleet's approach. We have advanced cloaking systems that might work even in dimensional space. Jake looked around the table. These beings had been fighting alongside humanity for 3 years. They had watched their worlds burn and their people die. Now they were volunteering for what might be the final battle of the war. "The Earth Defense Force will join the attack," Jake said. "Our ships are old, but our crews know how to fight." Hayes nodded respectfully. "Thank you, all of you. I know what I'm asking. But remember, we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting to prove that some things are worth dying for." Admiral Burke, who had been silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke. "Captain Hayes, your ship has been gone for 57 years. Earth has changed in that time. The Federation has changed. Are you sure you still understand what you're fighting for?" Hayes looked at each person around the table, his eyes taking in the mix of human and alien faces. "Admiral, 15 years ago I thought I was fighting for Earth. Then I learned I was fighting for humanity. Now I know I'm fighting for something bigger than any one species. I'm fighting for the right of all thinking beings to choose their own destiny." He gestured to the hologram showing the galaxy. "The architects see us as raw material. They think we're too simple to matter. But we're sitting here together. Different species working as one, planning to risk everything to save each other. That's something they'll never understand." Jake smiled grimly. "Then let's teach them." The news spread through the Federation fleet like fire through dry grass. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the Defiance engineering section, watching Pete Collins work alongside Roy Stevens, the chief engineer from the Wanderer. The two men were installing something that looked like a crystal spider web throughout the ship's power systems. "This is dimensional field generator," Stevens explained, his hand steady despite his age. "It will allow your ship to exist in multiple dimensional layers at the same time. Your shields will be harder to hit and your weapons can strike targets that are phased out of normal space." Pete wiped sweat from his forehead. "How much power does this thing use?" "About 30% of your total output," Stevens replied. "But it's the only way to survive in the space around the fortress world. Normal matter breaks down when the architects start bending reality." Jake watched the installation with mixed feelings. The technology was amazing, but it came from 15 years of fighting an enemy that most people couldn't even imagine. Hayes and his crew had paid a terrible price for this knowledge. "How many ships have been upgraded so far?" Jake asked. 43, Stevens answered. "We're working around the clock, but it's slow going. Each installation takes about 18 hours. Jake nodded and left the engineers to their work. He made his way to the bridge where Lisa Grant was coordinating with the other ship captains. The main screen showed a tactical display of the entire Federation fleet, scattered across 3 star systems for safety. "What's the latest from Admiral Burke?" Jake asked. "She's having problems with the Centauri Defense Council," Lisa replied. "They want to surrender to the Kythera rather than risk everything on one attack." Jake sighed. The Centauri colonies had always been cautious. They preferred negotiation to fighting, which had served them well in peacetime. But this war had no room for half measures. "Any response from the other species?" he asked. "Admiral Kevoth has committed all remaining Altarian ships," Lisa said. "That's 37 vessels, including 2 dreadnoughts. Crystal Singer Veltar is bringing 21 Vectar Quantum ships. The Zephyrians are contributing 15 stealth frigates." Amy Torres looked up from her communication station. "Sir, I'm getting reports from the frontier worlds. The Kythera are launching massive attacks everywhere. It's like they know we're planning something." Jake felt a chill. "Show me." The main screen changed to show a galactic map with red indicators spreading across multiple sectors. The Kythera were hitting civilian targets, military bases, and resource centers simultaneously. It was the largest offensive they had mounted since the war began. "They're trying to force us to split our forces," Jake realized. "Every ship we send to defend those worlds is one less ship for the main attack." Lisa nodded grimly. "We've lost contact with the Rigel colonies completely. The new Tokyo system is under siege. Admiral Martinez is requesting immediate reinforcements." Jake stared at the display, feeling the weight of command. Millions of innocent people were under attack, but sending help would doom the mission to destroy the primary anchor point. It was an impossible choice. His thoughts were interrupted by an incoming transmission. Captain Hayes appeared on the screen, looking even more tired than usual. "Captain Morrison, we need to accelerate our timeline," Hayes said without preamble. "Our long-range sensors are detecting massive dimensional disturbances throughout Kythera space. The architects are preparing to begin the merger process ahead of schedule." "How much time do we have?" Jake asked. "Maybe 2 weeks," Hayes replied. "The dimensional modifications on your ships are crude compared to what the Wanderer carries, but they should be enough." We need to launch the attack as soon as possible. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew had been through 3 years of hell, fighting a war they couldn't win against an enemy they barely understood. Now they were being asked to trust their lives to alien technology and follow a man who had been missing for 57 years. But what choice did they have? All ships, this is Morrison, Jake announced over the fleet communication system. Prepare for emergency departure in 6 hours. All vessels with dimensional modifications will form the attack group. Everyone else will conduct diversionary operations to keep the Kythera busy. The response was immediate. Captain Rodriguez of the Santiago was the first to reply. Jake, half my crew thinks this is insane. The other half thinks we're already dead. Count us in. One by one, the other captains confirmed their participation. Even the ships that weren't ready for dimensional modifications volunteered for the diversionary attacks. Jake felt a surge of pride in the human crews who were willing to follow him into the unknown. But the alien responses were even more moving. Admiral Kevoth transmitted from his flagship, the massive dreadnought Pride of Altair. Captain Morrison, the Altarian Navy has fought beside humans for 3 years. We have learned to trust your species' courage and ingenuity. If Captain Hayes says this attack can save the galaxy, then we will follow him to whatever end awaits. Crystal singer Veltar's harmonic voice came over the speakers. The Vectar have calculated the probability of success at 12.7%. We have also calculated the probability of survival if we do nothing at 0%. The mathematics are clear. Commander Splash of Distant Waters bubbled her agreement. The Zephyrian Deep Scouts will lead the way through enemy space. We know how to move unseen, even by beings that exist in multiple dimensions. Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not the desperate hope of cornered animals, but the genuine hope that came from seeing different species unite for a common cause. But that hope was tested when the first reports came in from the diversionary attacks. Captain Williams of the Melbourne led 12 ships in an assault on a Kythera supply depot. Only 3 ships returned, and Williams wasn't among the survivors. They're fighting harder than ever, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the Melbourne's surviving communications officer. It's like they know this is the end game. Jake gripped the arm of his command chair. Every ship lost in the diversionary attacks was another friend gone, another crew that wouldn't see home again. But their sacrifice was buying time for the main attack force to prepare. The Wanderer finished its modifications to the last batch of ships just as the attack fleet assembled near Jupiter. Jake looked at the tactical display showing their combined forces. 87 vessels from 4 different species, armed with technology they barely understood, preparing to attack the most heavily defended target in the galaxy. It's not enough, he said quietly to Lisa. She looked at him with steady eyes. It's what we have, sir. It'll have to be enough. Jake activated the fleet-wide communication system one last time before the attack. All ships, all crews, this is Captain Morrison. In a few hours we're going to jump into the heart of enemy territory and attempt something that has never been done before. Some of us won't be coming back. Maybe none of us will. He paused, looking around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Pete Collins had grease on his hands from the final modifications. Amy Torres was checking communication frequencies for the last time. Lisa Grant was running through tactical scenarios, preparing for every possible situation. But if we succeed, Jake continued, we won't just be saving our own species. We'll be proving that courage and sacrifice can overcome any threat, no matter how powerful. We'll be showing the universe that some things are worth fighting for. He took a deep breath. All ships prepare for dimensional jump. Target the Kythera fortress world. May whatever gods you believe in watch over us all. The fleet engaged their modified hyperdrive systems simultaneously. Space twisted around them in ways that hurt to look at directly. Stars stretched into impossible lines, and reality itself seemed to bend and fold. They were jumping directly into the most dangerous place in the galaxy, armed with untested weapons and powered by nothing but determination. It was either the bravest thing anyone had ever attempted, or the most foolish. In a few hours they would find out which. The fortress world existed in nightmare. Captain Jake Morrison stared at the main screen of the Defiant and tried to understand what he was seeing. The planet below them was not entirely solid. Parts of it phased in and out of reality, appearing and disappearing like a mirage. The surface showed impossible geometry where mountains bent upward into spirals and oceans flowed in perfect cubes. Dimensional readings are off the scale, Lisa Grant reported, her voice tight with stress. The entire system is partially merged with the architect's space. Normal physics don't apply here. Around them, the Federation attack fleet struggled to maintain formation. Ships flickered between dimensions as their modified shields worked to keep them stable. 3 vessels had already been lost when their dimensional generators failed, causing them to phase completely out of normal space. Contact report, Amy Torres called out. Kythera bioships are approaching from multiple vectors. Count is, I can't get an accurate count. They're phasing in and out too fast. Jake watched enemy vessels appear and disappear around his fleet. The bioships looked even more alien in this twisted space. Some of them moved through solid matter as if it wasn't there. Others seemed to exist as pure energy, taking physical form only when they fired their weapons. All ships engage at will, Jake ordered. Stay close together and watch your dimensional readings. The battle began unlike anything in recorded history. Weapons fire crossed between dimensions, striking targets that existed in different layers of reality. The Defiant's modified pulse cannons fired streams of energy that bent through space-time, hitting enemies that couldn't be seen on normal sensors. A Kythera bioship appeared directly in front of them, its organic hull covered in weapons that glowed with dimensional energy. Jake felt his stomach lurch as the enemy vessel fired a beam that passed through the Defiant's hull without touching the metal, but somehow still damaged their internal systems. Shields down to 40%, Pete Collins reported from engineering. The dimensional field generator is overheating. Return fire, Jake ordered. Lisa triggered their main weapons, sending a pulse of multi-dimensional energy at the bioship. The beam struck the enemy vessel and seemed to tear it apart from the inside, causing pieces of it to phase into different dimensions before vanishing completely. But for every Kythera ship they destroyed, 2 more appeared. The enemy had committed everything to defending this system. Bioships, energy beings, and constructs that defied description swarmed around the Federation fleet. Through the chaos, Jake could see the Wanderer leading a spearhead toward the planet's surface. Captain Hayes's ship moved through the dimensional maze like it belonged there, phasing through enemy attacks and returning fire with weapons that seemed to strike from multiple angles at once. Jake, this is Hayes, came a transmission from the Wanderer. We've located the primary anchor. It's in a crystalline structure about 2 kilometers down from the planet's north pole. The structure exists in 12 dimensions simultaneously. Can you reach it? Jake asked. We're trying, Hayes replied. But the defenses are incredible. We're going to need a distraction, something to draw the Guardian ships away from the anchor site. Jake looked at his tactical display. Half the Federation fleet was already engaged in desperate battles throughout the system. The other half was fighting to maintain position against waves of enemy attackers. All ships new priority target, Jake announced. We need to draw enemy forces away from the North Pole. Form attack groups and hit every major installation you can find. The response was immediate. Admiral Kevoth led his remaining Altarian dreadnoughts in an assault on what looked like a massive space station that existed partially inside a star. Crystal Singer Veltar took her quantum ships against floating crystal formations that seemed to bend space around themselves. Commander Splash of Distant Waters led the Zephyrian stealth frigates in hit-and-run attacks against bioship production facilities. The diversionary attacks worked. Hundreds of Kythera Guardian ships broke off from defending the anchor site to respond to the new threats. But the cost was terrible. Jake watched ship after ship disappear from his tactical display as the enemy responded with overwhelming force. Hayes, you've got a clear path, Jake transmitted. But it won't last long. Understood, Hayes replied. Beginning final approach now. On the main screen, Jake watched the Wanderer dive toward the planet's twisted surface. The ship phased through layers of defensive energy fields and dodged weapons fire from ground-based installations. It moved like a living thing, flowing between attacks and striking back with precise bursts of dimensional energy. But as the Wanderer approached the anchor site, something new appeared on the sensors. A massive form rose from the planet's surface, defying every law of physics Jake knew. It was hundreds of kilometers long, made of what looked like crystallized space-time itself. What is that? Lisa gasped. That's an architect, came Hayes's voice over the radio. A real one, not just a servant species. It's manifesting directly in our reality to protect the anchor. The being was impossible to look at directly. It existed in too many dimensions at once. appearing as different shapes from different angles. When it moved, space-time rippled around it like water. When it spoke, the sound came from everywhere at once. "Primitive creatures," the voice echoed through every ship in the fleet simultaneously. "You understand nothing. We offer transformation into higher forms, yet you choose destruction. You will be converted to raw energy and used to fuel our expansion." Jake felt terror unlike anything he had ever experienced. This was a being that existed on a scale beyond human comprehension, with power that could remake reality itself. How could they possibly fight something like this? But then he heard Hayes' voice, steady and determined despite the impossible odds. "Jake, we're going for the anchor. The architect is trying to stop us by manifesting physically, but that makes it vulnerable to our weapons. Keep the bioships off us for just a few more minutes." "You heard him," Jake announced to the fleet. "All ships protect the Wanderer. This is it." The final battle was brief but devastating. Every surviving Federation ship threw itself between the Wanderer and the enemy forces trying to stop it. Ships died in minutes as they faced weapons that could erase matter from existence, but they bought Hayes the time he needed. Jake watched the Wanderer reach the crystalline anchor structure and begin firing with everything it had. The ship's dimensional weapons struck the crystal formation from multiple angles, causing reality to fracture around the impact points. "It's working," Hayes transmitted. "The anchor is destabilizing, but we can't escape the collapse effect. Everyone else needs to get out of the system now." "Hayes, we're not leaving you," Jake replied. "Yes, you are," Hayes said firmly. "The anchor explosion will create a dimensional cascade that will destroy anything within 10 light years. You have maybe 2 minutes to jump to hyperspace." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was staring at him, waiting for orders. Lisa had tears in her eyes. Pete Collins was shaking his head. Amy Torres was trying to maintain communications with the Wanderer. "Dan, there has to be another way." Admiral Burke's voice came over the channel from Earth. "There isn't," Hayes replied. "But it's okay. We've been fighting this fight for 15 years. We're ready to end it." The anchor structure began to collapse, sending waves of energy across multiple dimensions. The architect let out a sound like reality tearing, and its massive form started to fade as its connection to this universe weakened. "All ships, emergency jump," Jake ordered, his voice breaking. "Get us out of here." The Federation fleet engaged their hyperdrives just as the dimensional anchor exploded. The blast sent shockwaves through space-time itself, creating a cascade effect that spread throughout the galaxy at faster than light speed. Jake watched from hyperspace as the explosion consumed the fortress world and everything around it. The Kythera bioship simply stopped moving as the dimensional energy that powered them disappeared. Across the galaxy, the other anchor points collapsed in chain reaction, severing the architect's connection to normal reality. 3 months later, Jake stood in the memorial garden on Luna Station, looking at the simple monument erected where the Wanderer had first appeared. The inscription read exactly as Admiral Burke had suggested: "To those who returned when hope was lost and those who stayed behind so others could be free." The universe is vast, but the human spirit is infinite. The war was over. The Kythera Collective had surrendered completely, their bioships powered down and their crews freed from dimensional control. Many of them were joining the Federation as full members, sharing their biotechnology in exchange for protection and friendship. Lisa Grant approached and stood beside him. She wore the uniform of a Commodore now, promoted to help command the new Dimensional Defense Corps. Pete Collins had been made Chief of Engineering for the entire program. Amy Torres was training new communication specialists in multi-species cooperation. "Any regrets?" she asked quietly. Jake thought about Hayes and his crew, lost in a dimension between realities. He thought about all the ships and crews that had died in the final battle. He thought about the price of victory. "No," he said finally. "They proved something important. They proved that some things are worth dying for and that courage can